And welcome back to another show. Last week we talked about finding where you are today so that you can figure out what your goal is. Today we're going to talk about setting that goal and tracking your progress so you can make sure you know exactly how it is going at all times. So let's get started. And you can catch our show every Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can also find the replays on Instagram as well as YouTube there. So feel free to subscribe. All right. So last week, as I mentioned, we talked about figuring out where you are so that you know where you ultimately want to go. Now let's talk about actually setting the goal. There's many different ways to set a goal. You can look at historical data and figure out a realistic approach to what your next step is. You can just say, my gut is telling me that I should shoot for 10% or 20%. As you know, we're talking about 30% growth on this show. And how do we get 30% growth in your business over the course of the next year? So you can do all kinds of different ways to pick your goal. The important part is that you have one, that you have something that you're going towards and something that you're moving towards. I'll tell you a quick story about how this really applies to me and what I've done before. And I've been setting goals for years and years and years, and a few things about what has worked and what hasn't worked. One thing that has worked dramatically for me is figuring out what the goal is, planting that stake in the ground, focusing only on that thing, and then circling, how am I going to accomplish it? How am I going to accomplish it? What do I mean by that? Let's say you've never had success at something. You just never had success at something. And you say, you know what? This is the year. And I'm going to plant the stake in the ground and I'm going to actually have success. I'm going to make some progress on this thing going forward this year. What that does by picking one thing and focus on one place is it helps you, one, stay focused, right? Because you've got that one thing that you're really, really focusing on. But also it helps you when you start asking, why, how, what else can I do? What else impacts this? So I'll give you an example. In my world, right? So we have B&I chapters. Okay. So it's a group of people who have, a group of people that come together to help each other grow their businesses on a regular basis. So when a chapter says, I want to grow, it's like, okay, boom, places the stake in the ground. There's really no one plan to accomplish any goal that you have. So when a chapter says, I want to grow, or our chapter wants to grow, there are many, many things you've got to look at to see if the chapter's ready for growth. So the first step is, are we ready for growth? Is everybody bought into it? Does everybody want it? Does it personally impact every single person to increase the number of referral partners in the room so that they can increase the number of referrals that could potentially be done? Because every person adds a multiplier to how many referrals can be done. Does everybody want that? Or is everybody in the room saying, I'm too busy, I've got plenty, I don't want to grow? Because if everybody in the room is comfortable where they are, growth is not going to happen. You need to look at this for your team as well. If everybody in your team is really comfortable with everything that they're currently doing and they don't want to do anything faster, better, different, you're going to have a hard time getting them behind you and actually creating growth. Now, when it's you only, you've got to look at that and say, am I willing to do something different, better, find another way to help myself, or else you're not going to want to grow. You really need to push forward to create that ultimate change. So that's what you got to look at first is, okay, as we kind of mentioned last time, what's the lay of the land, but also what's the psychology? What are the people around you willing to do? Another one that you never think of sometimes, well, I can sometimes never think of, is my family on board with giving me extra time and space to be able to actually reach the goal. If they're not into it and they're not going to be willing to give me a little bit of extra time every once in a while, maybe that's a challenge. I have to figure out how to onboard them into helping me have what I want, right? All right, so back to our chapter. First, we're figuring out, does everybody in the room really want this, so that there's nobody holding us back and pulling us backwards as we're trying to reach a goal. Second thing you want to look at then is you want to look at getting everyone on board with the goal, okay? Getting everybody on board with the goal. So I'll talk about a personal one for me. I did an amazing job in 2020 of staying very healthy. I know most of us fell off the wagon. I realized when we went into the pandemic that if I did not focus on mental health and exercise, that I was probably going to end up in the loony bin at the end of it. So I really needed to focus on those things to make sure that I was healthy by the end of this crazy, thing that was for me, it felt out of control. So this year, I kind of fell off the wagon last year towards the second half of the year, and now I'm getting back. I want to get back at it. I even started talking to myself about, am I willing to do things differently? What am I willing to change, and what am I not willing to change? What are going to be some ways what are going to be some different, where am I going to find the time? What are going to be some different things that I'm open to try and figure out how to ultimately start down that path again? And then I started off slow, and then I started off really, really slow. But that first part was just onboarding myself to, yes, I really want this. And yes, I'm willing to make the changes. And yes, I understand what those changes are. So first start that conversation with yourself, right? Are you willing to get your team? Are you willing to get your family? Are you willing to get everyone around you to rally to help you achieve this goal? If you can get that community around you, you're going to be much more successful, because that day that if I have this goal by myself, that day I no longer feel like it because I'm having a bad day. I'm going to have a really hard time keeping going. But if I have a community of people that I can call and say, oh, today's a bad day, I need some help here, then I'm much more likely to continue down the path of that goal. So the two things: one, start looking around, talking to people, assessing. Don't even talk to them yet. First step, don't talk to people. Assess if the people around you are ready to help you reach the goal. That just eases your path to success. Then second thing, start onboarding them, start explaining to them what you think you want to do, so that you can kind of plant those seeds, get them on board, and then they will ultimately want to help you. This is one thing that I've done throughout my career. It started with networking, right? When you're networking, you're talking to people, you're planting seeds of relationship with people, and you're talking to them and all those things. And pretty soon you've validated your idea, and you've got all these people on board with your idea. I took that into the corporate world, and I will never forget my first review in the corporate world after learning networking. And they said, you socialize things very well. And I was like, oh, that's another word for networking, right? I go out and I work on getting people's buy-in. This is what I'm thinking about doing. I want to grow my business by 30%. I'm thinking about doing this. What are some things that you think you can do to help me? We really want to get everyone on board. It doesn't get them committed at that point, but it gets them thinking out and warming up to the idea. Also, when you say I'm thinking about doing something, you don't sound committed, but your team members kind of have a little bit of space to say, okay, let me warm up to this comment. Let me warm up to this. Let me warm up to this feeling. And you also get to see their immediate response. So if you go to a team member and say, I want to grow by 30%, and they go, what? You see, okay, that's a little bit of more effort that I need to do to get that person really on board with me. And that's what I need to focus on next. All right. Once you've started planting these seeds to get people on board with doing all of this, then your next step is, how are you going to track it? How are you going to track your progress towards your goal? So if it's 30% business growth, if we've been talking about that, and we're going to do that based on revenue, then I need to start tracking my revenue every single periodic time, right? People say a month. A month, I think, is not enough because it doesn't create enough urgency. I do most of my tracking on a weekly basis. Some of it I do on a daily basis, but most of my tracking I do on a weekly basis, just so I can say, what have we accomplished this week? And then I can go into my next week knowing I need to change some actions to either speed it up, slow it down, keep it the same. Don't take your foot off the gas if you've got something going. So what is that tracking mechanism going to be? For those of you who hate spreadsheets, sorry, spreadsheets tend to be the most awesome way to track this, because you can go out into your systems that you have, get the information and put it in a spreadsheet, and then you can graph it and you can see what it's looking like. And I make color coding on, is it going up or is it coming down? Or is it, am I adding as much as I added last week? And I can see both what is the additional piece and then what is the overall to see if I'm actually reaching that goal. So knowing that you have that tracking mechanism that you can look at, that helps you celebrate when you are on track. It also helps you realize I need to change my actions if I'm not on track yet. Okay. So 2 things you need to do with this. 1, I have to put something in my calendar to remind me to go and look for that information. So I have my time where I sit down and I gather all my information about all my goals. I have that in my calendar. I get pinged. That's my time to take action. And I start working on that so that I can take a look at it. Then I give myself a little bit of reflection time. So am I on track? Am I off track? What can I do differently when I do that? This stake in the ground that I talked about in the beginning and what can I do differently? If you are solely focused on making that thing happen, you will be surprised at how you can circle it and say, well, and you can start thinking about, well, this impacts that, and then that impacts this, and that impacts this. And you can start seeing, and I'll use a simple sales example, right? The more people you contact about your product, the more presentations you get. The more presentations you get, the more sales you get. The more sales you get, the more revenue you have. So now I have my progression. I can go back. Am I doing enough outreach so that I can do enough presentations? Am I doing enough presentations so I can close the sale? I can even track all of those things as well to then say, all right, well, now I've got a 10% conversion from talking to someone to getting a presentation. How can I improve that? Now I've got a 20% conversion from presentation to sale. How can I improve that? And we can start thinking about books we can read, people we can ask, training classes we can take. What kind of development do we ultimately need to make that work? All right. So what I want you to do for this week, all right, hopefully you've figured out where you are. Just throw out 30% if you're having struggle with a goal. And then really pay attention and set up that time each week to think about that goal. And then what is the information you can track to make sure you're making progress towards that goal? Put that in your calendar so that you can ultimately know, I've got to do that every single week, and make it a priority. You make it a priority, you'll start seeing progress. You might not see progress really, really quickly, but you'll start seeing how your actions lead to that progress. And really, you're going to have an absolutely great year. All right. So next, we're going to start talking about mechanisms to help you actually increase revenue. And we're going to talk about it in the space that I know best, and that is referral and relationship marketing and getting referrals from people that you know. So that's what we're going to be talking about on the next show. So join me next week.